explained. That was great. It's a great clip. That brings us, ladies and gentlemen, to our item 13, which is the superintendent's report, and I will turn it over to Dr. Hefner.
Thank you, Chairman Gant, members of the board. Of course, we had so many wonderful things to recognize during our school board spotlight. We still have other things I want to talk about, but I'm going to save those until after we've done our financial items. And so at this time, I'll introduce Mr. Lynn Richardson, who is our Chief Finance Officer, to share his items this evening. Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Dr. Hefner. First thing on the agenda is our 2016 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. Ms. Dawn Strickland from McGregor and Company is here to present it to you at this time.
Good evening. I'm Dawn Strickland with McGregor and Company, and we have completed the audit for the district's financial statements for the year ended June 30th, 2016. In conjunction with our audit, we've issued the independent auditor's report on the financial statements. And this is an unmodified opinion on the financials, which means they are materially correct in conformity with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States. And this is sometimes referred to as a clean opinion or an unqualified opinion. We've just hit the highlights of the financials here. The general fund is your main operating fund and is the basis that is held on the fund basis, which is the basis that you budget and maintain your books. In the general fund, you started the year off with a fund balance of $34,387,316. You had an increase during the fiscal year of $2,685,456, so that you ended the fiscal year with a fund balance in the general fund of $37,072,772. This $2.6 million increase is derived from revenues of $163,749,931, expenses of $165,023,383, and transfers and other items of $3,958,908. I was going to revisit the pension liability. Last year for the June 15 audit, you had to implement GASB 68, where you had to bring in the district's proportionate share of the pension liability from the South Carolina Retirement and Police Officers Retirement System. At June 30, 2015, this net pension liability that was recorded on your books was $210,028,254. The state retirement system has an actuarial study, and they have their own report where we get the information from that report for the district's proportionate share of the retirement system. And for the 16 year, there was an increase in this pension liability of $16,035,519. So at June 30th of 16, your net pension liability in the government-wide financials is now $226,063,773. In conjunction with our audit, we have also issued our report on the compliance of the major federal programs in conformity with the uniform guidance, or has been known in the past as the single audit. Based on your major federal programs, we did not find any findings on compliance with the major federal programs. We also issued a report on internal control and compliance in accordance with government auditing standards. In this report, we did have two findings dealing with internal controls, which are detailed in the findings and question cost report, and the district's corrective actions is included in the audit. As far as the compliance with government auditing standards, we had no findings dealing with compliance. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions from the board? I will comment, I know this is your all's first year to conduct this audit, and we appreciate you doing that. It was I'm sure, an interesting audit to go through, and I'm always very proud when I hear you say things like unqualified, and I forgot what the new unmodified. That's really a great report. Isn't that correct?
Yes, it is.
And I was glad to hear that with the financial accounting. I want to compliment Mr. Richardson's office and his staff for really keeping the P's and Q's of all this together. But we appreciate you all's efforts, too, in this audit for the first year. Any questions from the board? Ms. Baumgartner?
You mentioned that there were two failures that you noted. I'm assuming that they weren't very big, or else they would have changed the overall opinion.
They were findings dealing with the internal controls. So the financial statements as presented are correct because there were corrections made to the financials. But we reported those as internal control findings.
Okay, thank you.
Question? Ms. Hammond?
Clarification, do we have to, in auditing, do we worry about as the pensions go, as, like at the state, as the state employee, sometimes they move up the amount that you have to pay for the pension fund. I mean, there's some worry about looking at that and how it's going to, and I know that there are teachers that worry about that. That's not really in our budget. We don't have to worry about that. Is that more of a state level funding?
The state has each year, and they change it around, starting with the July 1st of each year. They have their set percentages
Okay.
based on your salary, the district's portion and the employee's portion.
So there's a portion from the district and then a portion at the state level.
Right, and that has been going on for years.
I know, that was one
And
reason I asked.
this-
There are people that worry about that.
That is being completely covered or paid 100%. The district's portion is 100% paid. And those amounts are in the report here in that note disclosure. The part with this net pension liability that has to be picked up and put on as of June 15, was required to be put on, that is the entire South Carolina and police officers' retirement system, and they take the proportion, they take all the members and take their proportion, so there's a percentage of the total liability that if everybody had to be paid out, that would be
Okay.
the liability.
Thank
But the
you.
district is
Sure.
paying is
Their
current with
portion.
all of their portions.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much for that report, and I'm sure we'll follow up with Mr. Richardson if anything comes out of this that we need to follow up with him. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, and it was a pleasure to work with the finance department. They were all very, very nice to work with. Thank you.
Thank you, and now we'll go to the financial reports for October of this year.
You once again, Dr. Hefner. I would like to draw your attention to one thing in the audit before we put that away. On page 69, which is note 14, talking about fund balances, I just want to note that we have, I think I mentioned that earlier when we were talking about the Chapin Middle School project. I wanted to note that there's $6.8 million of our fund balance is set aside for future capital needs. And that's part of where you're seeing our budget for the Chapin Middle School come from.
Will you say that amount again for me?
$6.8 million.
6.8
It's on
million
page
set aside.
69 of the audit. In Exhibit C of your board packets, you have the October expenditure and revenue summaries. The board packets had to go out before we had November's ready, so that's why you only see October's in this packet. I'll note that we are, as of October, 33% through the year. For the month of October, on page 2 of the revenues, you'll note, total revenue for the month of $10,750,278. $10,750,278. We had expenditures, were shown on page 9 of the expenditure page, of $14,130,738. Year-to-date, we've collected revenue of $30,275,172, and we've expended $40,158,245. I think I mentioned to you the last board meeting that we hopefully will see those numbers switching, where our revenue is a little bit higher than our expenditures coming up. We've started collecting property tax relief now. We'll see a big chunk of that coming in. Well, you'll see it when we do the December reports. And so you'll start seeing those numbers flip a little bit, but this is why we have to have a sufficient fund balance on hand to get us through those lean months. I will be glad to try to answer any questions that you may have.
Question?
That is the end of my report.
All right, thank you, Mr. Richardson. And before we leave the superintendent's report, I would like to officially congratulate Chapin Middle School. They have been named a school to watch, which is a very high honor for a middle school in our state. Is Ms. Miller here?
Yes.
Let's congratulate Mrs. Miller for that. Very rigorous process and indicating that the practices that are in place on that campus are something that we would want schools all over our country to watch what's going on there. And of course, it's certainly no surprise to us, but that the niche.com ratings, one of those groups that rates schools all over the country, released their most recent set of ratings following our last meeting. And as I indicated to you in my brief, our district is the #1 district in South Carolina. We're the #1 district with the best teachers in South Carolina. We're the #1 district in terms of best place for teachers to teach, the #1 district for student athletes in South Carolina, and all of our schools were rated in the A category, either an A+, A, or A-, which I think is just hugely significant. And talking about a great place for student athletes, we certainly give our congratulations to Dutch Fork High School, who will be playing for the 5A state championship this Saturday night. Congratulations, Dr. Owings, and to your team. And one other thing of significance that recently occurred this past Saturday night. One very significant part of our district's history is the Rich Lex School. And it's a part of our history and culture that we don't ever want to lose and let go away. And this weekend, there was a group of about 200 people who got together at Dutch Fork Elementary, which is the old Rich Lex site. Excuse me. And many of the teachers from that era came back. And I'm going to ask Larry Halterwanker if he would be so kind to just give us a little brief report on that event and what went on and how many people came back and the significance of that.
Thank you, Dr. Hefner. I think I mentioned to one of the reporters the significance of it is that, first of all, it's very bright history, and in my life personally, foundation and basics are always very important to anything you do. And let me say that that's where my educational foundation began. I think I mentioned that the importance of it. One of the young ladies asked the importance of what you had done, how in terms of the teachers that taught you. And I told her that in those days, the teachers that taught you were really your second parent, or your parent away from home. And they had the privilege, I'll say privilege, to do whatever they thought was necessary with you away from home. I won't get into what all that went on, but seriously, it set the foundation for our lives. And as he said, about 200 people. This is the second one, I think, that we've had in 48 years. The school closed in it changed names in 1969, I believe, 1970. But it was a very good event, and I want to thank Dr. Hefner and Mr. Bounds and the staff and the guys that came and took pictures. I think we had some media there, as well as the students from the Media Magnet at Seven Oaks were there as well, and also Mr. Scott, the principal of the school. We had a very good time, good fun and fellowship. I really didn't recognize half of them, to be honest with you. We've changed over the years a little bit, but we had a very good time. We even did a few, cubic shuffle and a wobble and electric slide and things like that. So we had a very good time. It sounds like Most people don't know what that is. That's a dance. That's called, that's dance. Okay. But anyway, we had a very good time, and again, we thank all those that came back and for your willingness to help us out in putting that together. Thank you so much.
Mr. Halterwanger, what was the age of the oldest person you had in attendance?
The age of the oldest person was about 99. A teacher, one of our teachers, Ms. Shumpert, I believe. She's almost 100. Matter of fact, she got up and spoke, if I'm not mistaken, for about 5 minutes. Yes.
Well, that's great, and I'm so glad our students were there to record it and do the oral history. And again, it's a rich part of our history of this district. It's a big part of who we are, and we don't want to lose those personal stories and the personal identity of the people who came through that system. All right, that concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Hefner, and thank you, Mr. Halterwanger, for giving us a rundown on that. It was great. That brings us to item number 14.